It's very difficult for him to do so. This is a very, very strong form of control that leads very handily from many different angles into arm lock pressure that we'll be looking at later. Okay, so this is your third form of control. So once again, I have two knees around my opponent's shoulder. The knee that's on top becomes the top leg. The knee that's on bottom becomes bottom leg control. And we can get, as it were, the best of both worlds by crisscrossing over my training partner's wrist. So when he tries to twist and turn, it's very difficult for him to do so. Now, a very important background principle to all these methods of control is the so-called planted foot principle. What does this refer to? If I have my feet off the ground in situations like this, you have very little control over your training partner's arm. When Placido goes to limp his arm out, it's very easy for him to do so. Anytime the feet are completely off the floor, you lose a lot of tension in your opponent's arm, and it makes simple limp arm escapes considerably easier for your opponent. You always want at least one of your feet at any given moment planted on the ground. This means that when Placido goes to limp his arm free, it is significantly more difficult for him. And this is true regardless of how you've configured your legs, whether it be top, bottom, or crisscross. In all situations, you want at least one of your feet at any given moment on the mat. So when he goes to limp his arm, it's significantly more difficult for him. When both of my feet come off the mat, it's exactly when someone can start limping their arms free. So the planted foot principle is very, very important. Let's work just a little bit more. This one? Just a little bit. Now, from here, notice when my foot is on the mat, I usually take the other foot and put it on my own shin. So that when Placido goes to move around, you can create a very strong wedge in the armpit with this knee. When my foot drifts away from the other shin, the wedging effect of the bottom knee is dramatically lessened. So I typically put a foot on my own shin and then point vertically up to the ceiling. So when Placido goes to twist his arm, the wedging effect inside the tricep is very strong. Similarly, when we go with bottom arm control, I can't really get this foot to the floor anymore, so instead we just connect it here to our opposite leg. When he goes to twist and turn now, it's very, very difficult. And regardless of whether we use triangled legs or what have you, the fact that you have a wedge on the opposite side of the arm that's trapping of the leg that's trapping your opponent's arm adds greatly to the wedging pressure around your opponent's shoulder. So when Placido goes to twist his arm free, the fact that my left foot is planted on the mat with my left knee as a wedge over his shoulder makes it very hard for him to escape. When I switch, the fact that my knee is high up here as a wedge means when Placido goes to twist and limp his arm free, it's very, very difficult for him to do so. This gets taken care of automatically when we cross our ankles over our training partner's wrists. Then when we plant our foot, it puts immediate pressure on my training partner's arm. He goes to twist down, and again, it's extremely difficult for him. So a very important principle, the planted foot principle. When we go to control an opponent, at least one of our feet should be planted on the mat. And this is true regardless of whether we go top arm, bottom arm, or crisscross with our feet crossed over our training partner's arm. Now, another very, very important element. At any given moment, I should be able to switch from top arm to bottom arm at will. This should be something you should be able to do on any opponent at any time. So if I have top leg control on my opponent's arm, in these kinds of situations, I should be able to make the switch very easily. How is this done? By taking our foot to our own shin bone. And as a result, as I remove one foot, the other one always kicks in. Same on the opposite side. I put my foot on my own shin, so as I remove one, I effortlessly pass his arm to the other. Here, Placido's left arm is controlled by my left leg. I put my right foot on my own left calf muscle or shin, so that when I go to remove, I switch my control from top leg to bottom leg. Every time we make this adjustment, just placing my foot on the shin and raking tension through the arm means we can easily substitute one form of control to the other very, very easily. This is a skill you must develop. You should, at any time, be able to switch from bottom leg control to top leg control. From top leg control back to bottom leg control. And this should be easy and effortless for you. This is an absolutely critical skill. Now, when it's time for us to control these positions, very often your opponent will be trying to limp his arm out. You can see that if I put poor tension in Placido's arm, it's quite easy for him to move his shoulder in a way which enables his elbow to slip free. Same thing here. What's going on? If there's insufficient tension running through the arm and his shoulder can move, when the shoulder moves, he can turn and change the angle of his thumb, and as a result, easily slip free. So we need tension in the arm. We've seen how to generate that. We need one foot planted on the mat. We've seen the importance of this principle. Another element, which is very important, is the idea of a hand post. If I'm going to switch my opponent's arm from top leg control to bottom leg, it is often a very good idea to use your hand as an action hand, which will post on your training partner's tricep, so that as I make the switch, my hand backs up my legs. So that if Placido tries to time the switch, my hand keeps his arm in place long enough to get my legs locked on the other side. Again, if I want to make the switch, I can place my hand on the tricep. So when Placido tries to lift his arm, my hand holds him in place. There will be other situations where similar things can be done. Very often an opponent will try to close his hands together. As I control one hand and he tries to bring the other one in, very often from here, we'll be able to hand assist and use that to place a second hand over the top and go into crisscross configurations. Or take the leg out entirely and go into bottom leg configurations. When I see his foot coming in towards me, there will be times for us in these situations where it's relatively easy for us to use a hand assist to come out and get that tension through the arm. You can use this hand as an action hand to block the tricep, block the shoulder, even block the head, and if necessary, grab the hand. We'll be looking for different ways to use this kind of hand action later on in the video, but you can see that this hand can be an active part of what you're doing. Understand always a very important principle. We've looked at the principle of the vertical knee and the planted foot. There is a third principle. Much of your opponent's defensive ability in back crucifix position comes from his ability to lock his hands together defensively. It's not the end of the world if someone locks their hands, but it can create significant annoyance for you as the attacking athlete if this occurs. So most of the time, we're looking to create situations where it's very difficult for your opponent to connect his hands. The key is to understand the end of the lever. I want my foot, if I'm using top leg control, close to the wrist. So when he tries to bring the hand in, it's very difficult. If I use bottom leg control, it is easier for an opponent to bring his hands together. So I need to be vigilant, making sure I control, let's move your leg down, making sure I control this hand. So when he tries to bring them together, it's difficult. If necessary, he tries to bring them together, I can pass the second foot over the top and create hand assists where now it becomes impossible for him to connect his hands. We'll be looking at these kinds of leg configurations later on in the video, but they do create some interesting possibilities for you. This is almost like an American lock on your training partner's arm. And again, it comes from a hand assist. Leg down. So when an opponent tries to connect those hands, you have you're using your bottom leg to control the arm. You can bring his hands fairly close together. Good. This is a good time for us to hand assist. And then from here, pass our leg over the top and lock things up. Now when he goes to bring his hands together,
No.
it's almost impossible for him. Okay, then you can put tension through your opponent's arm in ways which are quite constructive. So we'll be looking at to set up strangleholds, etc., as we get further into the video. Okay, so that's our third principle. Whenever possible, we want to prevent our opponent from connecting his hands. Later on in the video, we'll look at how to deal with situations where he does successfully connect the hands. That's a very important skill. But for now, these key principles. Make sure you've got a foot planted on the floor at all times to create strong wedging effects around your opponent's arm. Make sure that you make it difficult for an opponent to connect hands. It's not the end of the world if he does connect them, but it's an annoyance that you don't want to have to deal with. And make sure your knees, particularly when you have top leg control, are pointing vertically up so you create a good set of tension running through your opponent's arm, so it won't be easy for him to bring hands together, and you'll be able to regulate the tension through the arm in ways where you can move your opponent around. So those are the key elements to controlling the far arm. Let's try to summarize some of the elements we've looked at with regards to controlling our opponent's far arm. There are three core elements of far arm control, which you can remember very simply with the idea of a hook leg, a wedging knee, and a propping foot on the floor. Those three elements together form a very strong form of far arm control. So if I'm locked up in a crucifix with Placido, let's rotate this way, buddy. Very good. Now, we need a hooking leg. That's the leg that hooks over our training partner's forearm, somewhere between the wrist and the elbow, closer to the wrist for more leverage. We need more than this. If I don't have any ability to wedge my opponent's arm, look how easily Placido can limp his elbow out. So what we need is a knee that wedges all the way up in here. So when he tries to take his arm in that fashion, it's blocked by the wedging knee. However, I can never have my feet up off the floor. Then I can't derive any power off the mat and change my body position. And your opponent can ultimately limp his arm out. So what we want to do is create situations where we have 1, a hooking leg, 2, a wedging knee, and a foot on the mat, at least 1. Those 3 elements, the hook leg, the wedging knee, and the foot on the mat, give us our best results. The easiest way for most people in stressful situations to get all 3 in an adequate level is to lock a triangle. When you lock the triangle, don't lock a true triangle, like so. That diminishes the wedging impact of your knee. Look how easily Placido can wiggle his arm and limp his arm out. What we want is a semi-sinkaku, where your foot hooks halfway down your calf muscle. This creates a much better wedge effect. Now, even if we do have this good wedging element in place, still it's possible for Placido to play with the orientation of his thumb, bridging, moving, and limping his arm free. And this can be done in different directions. So no matter how good a job we do of locking that triangle, keeping our knees close together, wedging, hooking, and propping off the floor, we still have to be mentally alert to changes in orientation of his thumb. So if I see, for example, I have my triangle locked and Placido starts raising his body and limping his elbow over my knee, I need to change the direction of my triangle, okay? So let's have a look at how this might work. Put this leg down first. From here, when I see